Hi everyone, it's Grant Abbott speaking from I Love SMSF, and we're talking about the 5 reasons to take your super now, plus more importantly, how to do it. You can see there we've got a beautiful little piggy bank there, and ordinarily you can't access your super in Australia until you're retired, which generally is at least as early as age 58. But just to show you, I know both my brother, who turns 55 today, has lodged his application through the MyGov website to receive the $10,000 from an old super fund that he found just recently. And he'll be doing the same post the 1st of July as well to receive another $10,000. So he prefers to have it now rather than wait for it later. His business has been impacted by the coronavirus, so he's in a good position to do so. And we'll go through the requirements for you to complete those, bearing in mind they are self-assessment, so you don't have to put any evidence or criteria to the tax office. Just if you meet these criteria, then you're A-OK, and I'll go through all of that, show you where to go, etc. Now, the other end of the spectrum is my young daughter, who is basically being laid off from the AFL in their marketing area. She will be receiving the JobKeeper, but effectively she's got around about $7,000 sitting in her superannuation account and has chosen to withdraw that amount of money to pay off credit card debt and also to have it for the next few months. Again, she's right at the very start of her superannuation career, and to really put it in perspective, the super guarantee levy didn't come into 1991 or 92. So for many baby boomers, they didn't even start receiving their superannuation or get superannuation until probably post age 40. So for the younger brigade, you well and truly are on top of everything anyway. So let's go on and have a look. And importantly, because we're dealing with superannuation withdrawal, this is not personal advice. So essentially, this is an education and information session. I'm going to take you through the regulations and, more importantly, what it means, explanatory memorandum, show you some tax office information, some ASIC information. So you've got a really good, strong regard of what needs to happen rather than simply reading on a piece of paper or a newspaper or a website. Or more importantly, people are already starting to cold call, which is illegal, about switching super or taking money out. So you've got to be very careful about that. It's highly recommended that you get advice from a registered tax agent or a financial planner. It's good to draw it out, but it's good to sit down and say, okay, well, what are you going to use that money for? I mean, it's not beer money or to go out and buy a bike. You actually need to put it to a proper purpose, and a tax agent and a financial planner can help you and also go through some good tax strategies around it. Being mindful of the fact that any withdrawal under this system is absolutely tax-free, which is quite amazing, because ordinarily, if you were able to withdraw it under the age of 58, you'd be paying 20% tax on it. So that's one of my strategies. It's certainly not one of the reasons. That's one of the strategies. You're actually saving yourself tax by being able to withdraw it. The material that I'm going through is I'm going to actually take you to government legislation, real legislation, and government regulators. And if I have a little, sorry about the typo there, but just remember, these are a lot of my views here. Now, you've also got to be careful extremely about loss of insurances, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Now, my daughter will be taking money out of her fund, but I have to warn her that she will want to ensure that effectively that she doesn't lose her insurances. However, have a look at the ASIC's Money Smart website on COVID-19 accessing your super, because generally, if your account balance is under $6,000, then no insurance is there anyway. So she would be able to get insurance, but she will lose insurance down the future. So she's got to be mindful of that impact. Now, I've been doing superannuation for a long time, and I can tell you, being able to access your superannuation under compassionate grounds, which is the relevant cause here, or the laws that they're putting in place, is very, very limited. You can generally access superannuation when you die, when you go into a coma, a vegetative state, or under compassionate grounds, for example, palliative care. I did deal with a client recently who was not able to make their mortgage payments on their house. The bank was going to foreclose on their mortgage, and as a consequence of that, there's another compassionate ground which you might be mindful of, is that you can also withdraw from your super up to an amount of $10,000 as well for unemployment benefits. But you can also withdraw amounts equal to 12 months interest and 3 months of mortgage payments if the bank is seeking to foreclose. But I can't imagine many banks are foreclosing at this current point in time. Now, to me, to being able to access your super at any time is a gift, but bearing in mind that going back to the 1990s, it was put in place at that stage that superannuation, which really was comes straight out of your salary and wages, was a way to boost your overall retirement income. So the money that is going to super doesn't come from your employer, doesn't come from your union, doesn't come from the government. It actually comes from your salary and wages. Now, it's quite useful in that regard, because obviously, when we have a look at that, the benefit of it is that by taking it out from salary and wages, you don't have to pay PAYG tax. So that's a really good position to be. So it effectively is your money. Now, really, it is yours. And look, I've, as I said, it's very unusual, but there's a short window, so that the applications for a withdrawal for this financial year, which ends 30 June 2020, are actually open now on the MyGov website. So well worthwhile going there. I'm sure it'll probably be blown up today. But effectively, you'll be able to get your money back within probably 5 to 10 working days, so as early as May 2020. Now, from the 1st of July to the 26th of September, there's another tranche. You can withdraw another $10,000. Now, if you don't make these times, if you don't get that first lot, then you're just stuck in with the second lot. And likewise with the second lot, if you're after 26th of September, then effectively you're out of the game. So we want to have a look at the review of the laws. As I said, the MyGov website's up and running to make the withdrawal. So what I want to look at is we'll go to the regulations and explanatory regulations, and how much can be taken and when, what are the requirements to complete, what's the process to make it happen, who can advise on it, tax agents and financial planners. Obviously, we've talked about insurances. How long will it take? I've talked about 10 days, but we need to obviously, both retail and industry superannuation funds, etc., are obviously concerned about a run on their superannuation funds and whether they've got enough cash. So we'll go through and see what their regulator, which is the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, says on that, and also what are the tax consequences. So I'm just going to bounce out of here and let me go to my, let me go up here and have a look at the tax office there. So I've got the tax office information. I've also got the Money Smart accessing your super. So just be careful about that. As I said, I've given you the link there. You will be getting these slides, so everything's pretty good in there. So let's go down and have a look at the early release of super. Now, as I said, it's best to have a look at it. If this is the first time you've been with me, I tend to go and have a look at the laws themselves, because essentially that is where the information is going to be. And more importantly, both the tax office, the Australian Securities Investment Commission, ASIC, the regulators, and also the trustees of superannuation funds must abide by these. Otherwise, there's quite drastic penalties. So Schedule 13 to the bill, so we don't worry about that, amends the SIS regulations, and the SIS regulations are the superannuation laws, to allow individuals affected by adverse economic effects of coronavirus to have up to $10,000 released from their superannuation or retirement savings account on compassionate grounds. Now, each person is permitted to have up to 2 releases, meaning they can have up to $20,000 released in total. One for an application made during the 2019-2020 financial year, which means by its very nature, that is going to close up. Mark Trimmer, do you see any hold up in payments being made from CBA RSA? I'm going to show you what to do to prevent that hold up happening. So we'll go and have a look at the ASIC guidelines on that one. But a really good question, Mark. Now, the second one is another for an application made during the 2020-21 financial year. But any applications for this release must be made within 6 months of the amendments commencing. So effectively, we've got to really be on our toes to make sure that we get it, because once it's there, it's effectively closed. So you can't sort of go in October and say, oh gosh, I didn't know about it. I didn't really know whether I wanted to do it. I'm short of money. Can I go in and get it? Because once that window is closed, it's effectively closed forever. And what does that mean? Well, super benefits are generally required to be preserved in the superannuation system until retirement or preservation age is reached. And it's not 55, it's actually 58 years now. So for most of you, it's going to be age 60. So the money sitting in your super, for example, my daughter at age 22, she's not going to be able to see it for, look, a good 40 or so years. Likewise, my brother, as I said, he's 55. He'll be able to access it at age 60, which is in 5 years' time, but he'd rather have that money now than wait for another 5 years. So there's bits and bobs. I mean, if you're 30 or 40 or whatever, then you generally look at you can look at the long term and say, okay, well, going down that track, I'm not going to be able to take it until that time. So there is a bit of, if you take it out now, obviously that is going to impact your retirement benefits. And again, have a look at that ASIC Money Smart website, because they do give a bit of an indication on what the amount of your retirement benefits are. But if we go and have a look at where we are in COVID-19 and the recession / potentially a depression coming down the track, then effectively you'd say, well, you don't know what the returns are going to be anyway. So let's go down. I've just marked it up for our perspective to make it easier for us to have a look. Now, this is the first one. Remember, I had a look at that question. Schedule 13 also amends the Tax Act to ensure that any amounts released on this ground are not subject to tax. Ordinarily, as I said, if you were able to access your super at an age less than age 55, you would have to be paying 20% tax on it. So you're in a pretty good position here for that. Again, it's not a strategy, it's just a really nice to have to know that if you're getting that $10,000 now and $10,000 later, that effectively it's completely tax-free. Now, to apply for the determination, so this is every individual applying, the person must satisfy any one of the following requirements about their employment or business status. Now, they don't need records from their employer, etc. It's a self-assessment system. At the time a person applies, they are unemployed. So if you are unemployed, effectively you can access $10,000. Now, here's an important point, and we heard about that before, is that under financial hardship, which is another separate release area, if you've been on unemployment benefits for 26 weeks, so that's for half a year, you can get an additional $10,000 out of your super. So not only can you get the coronavirus, the 2 compassionate grounds, 10 and 10, but if you're currently unemployed and you're on job payments, then effectively, or job seeker, then effectively, if you've been on that for say 2 months or a month, once you get to half a year, you'll be able to get another $10,000. But that again depends on if you remain unemployed. Eligible to receive a job seeker payment, as we said, a youth allowance, or get a farm household allowance, includes. Now, this is important for most of us. On or after the 1st of January 2020, the person was made redundant. So that's my daughter who's working at AFL. She's effectively been made redundant, although they are bringing in the job protector for them. Or your working hours reduced by 20% or more. Now, it's quite interesting there that this applies to even for people who have got quite significant amounts of insurance and quite significant amount of work. It's got nothing to do with a reduction in income. So let me say this again. There's nothing to do with a reduction in income. It's the fact that your working hours are reduced by 20% or more. So if you're on a normal 5-day week, the fact that you've dropped down to a 4-day week means you're now entitled to receive this COVID-19 compassionate grounds amount from your superannuation fund. Now, Brian Brother is a sole trader, so for his perspective, he can show that his business has been reduced by 20% or more. And we'll go down and we'll have a look at a couple of examples of this a little bit later on, so we know what the people who drafted this legislation are thinking about. Now, this is important. The amendments, so these are the new laws, do not specify any minimum documentation or evidentiary conditions for meeting these requirements. It is expected that individuals will self-assess their eligibility to apply for a determination, which is crucial. So that if you can show that you're redundant, your working hours reduced by 20% or more, or the fact that you're unemployed or getting job seeker, then you're right in there. And I'll cover the sole trader issue a little bit later on. Now, the important thing about this is, unlike that financial hardship where you can show that you've got, remember that unemployed, you've been unemployed for 26 weeks, you go to the trustee of your superannuation fund and then they make a determination you can take the $10,000 out. Here, it is up to the Australian Taxation Office to make that determination. And we'll see a little bit later on, they expect that determination to be made within 3 or 4 working days. So if we had an application in now, then the best possible scenario is that we'll get a notice, and I'll take you through the tax office site, a notice by Thursday or Friday this week. That notice, let's go through anyway, that notice will then go on to your super fund, and that super fund is then generally required to release it by no later than Friday of the following week. So in early May, you'll have your first $10,000. Anyway, let's go on. It's expected individuals self-assess. It is also expected the individuals will be able to apply for the determination online through the MyGov account using the ATO's online services. So you'll find in your MyGov account, most superannuation funds, for example, mark your CBA, RSA would be in there. You'll be able to access your account balance in there, hopefully, and I'll have a look at that. And likewise, you're going to have a position of being able to directly apply straight through the taxation office. Now, a person who is unemployed may also be eligible for early release from their super on the grounds of severe financial hardship, which I talked about. Now, let's have a look at a couple of examples. Darren is a casual worker in a cafe. In May 2020, Darren seeks to apply for an early release from his superannuation for the 2019-2020 financial year. Due to the adverse economic effects of the coronavirus, Darren's working hours have reduced from 35 hours a week in average down to 15 hours. Although there's so many people working in cafes, it's gone down to 0. As a result, Darren determines that his hours over the last month have reduced by more than 20% compared to the average hours over the last 6 months of 2019. So he noticed how they're looking at that 1 month. And it's at the time you make the application, have you got a reduction of 20 hours in the application? Now, you may make that in June. You may make it now. So if you're comfortable in April now, like my daughter, then absolutely you'll be able to make that application now. Now, here it is. Darren self-certifies, and that's through the MyGov website. You are certifying that you're eligible for early release and applies to have $10,000 released from your super. Now, my brother or any sole trader, Rachel is a sole trader with a catering business. At the end of July, Rachel seeks to apply for an early release from a super for the 2020-21 financial year. Obviously, she didn't make it for the 30 June for the first one. Due to adverse economic effects of the coronavirus, and let's face it, we do not know where we're going over the next year. It could be a very, very rocky ride already because of significant the ability to reduce rents in some states. There's concern that properties will have to go onto the market and be sold at fire sale prices, which means they're cheap as chips. Already, I've had a chat with an agent. My mother in Adelaide is selling her house because she's gone into a home. Unfortunately, we just got in the wrong time at the moment. But she's saying some of her clients are selling their properties $300,000 under what a typical price was only 1 month ago. So if you've got money, it's a great time to buy. Also, banks are pretty willing to lend if you have got a steady job. But we don't know what we don't know. So we're going into this void. Now, due to adverse economic effects of the coronavirus, Rachel's turnover for July, and remember this is just July, it's a month-to-month basis, is $5,000 compared to $10,000 on average per month for the second half of 2019. Remember, this applies from 1st of January 2020. Rachel therefore determines that her turnover is reduced by more than 20% compared to her average turnover. She again self-certifies that she's eligible for an early release, etc. So we've got a pretty good position there. Now, this is the absolute crucial thing. It's the how to do it. And more importantly, don't stuff up. Individuals are restricted to a single application. So when you make your application on the ATO website, you need to make sure you know what is sitting inside your superannuation fund. If there's only $6,000 and you go for only $6,000, then that's what you'll get. But if you've got $6,000 in one fund and $3,000 in another, and you only put in that first application for $6,000, then effectively you are only going to get $6,000, and you cannot come back at a later stage to try and reclaim that $3,000. So spend a bit of time to look at where your money is sitting inside the system. So individuals are restricted to a single application of financial year. This means a person cannot make multiple applications in the same financial year to release more than $10,000 for that year. It also means a person who requests an amount of less than $10,000 in their application financial year cannot make a subsequent application in the same financial year to release the difference between the original requested amount and the $10,000 limit. For example, a person who's requested that $6,000 be released cannot subsequently request that another $4,000 be released. However, a person with multiple accounts who has less than $10,000 in any one account is able to nominate more than one account from which amounts are to be released when they request the determination. Now, it does, well, we'll go to the ATO, but it does not matter if the Commissioner makes a determination in response to an application after the end of the financial year. So it's when that determination is made. So again, the combined effect of these rules is that each person is permitted to have up to 2 releases, one for an application made during 2019-20 and also 2021. So what will happen is the Commissioner makes a determination that a person is eligible to be released on the new compassionate ground, and the Commissioner will tell you what amount is. The Commissioner must also provide a copy of the determination to the person who requested any superannuation entity covered by the determination. Now, my feeling is that they're not going to look at it that quickly. Now, there was a bit of talk around some industry and retail funds saying that their trustee didn't allow them to pay out under these circumstances. So as a consequence of that, they actually changed the laws, and they said the amendments also insert a new operating standard for regulated funds. This new standard requires funds to release an amount specified in relation to them in the determination they receive from the Commissioner about a member. In such cases, the superannuation is required to release amount to the member. So if you've got a fund saying, look, we can't do it unless it's a defined benefit fund. Unless it's a defined benefit fund, then they cannot use that. So the relevant standard there is you could go to AFCA or alternatively contact your advisor who'll be able to get quickly onto the matter. So let's go to the tax office quickly. Then we're going to go to APRA, which looks after these funds. And again, I'm going to look through the 5 reasons. Just wait for a little while on that one. So I'm going to look at eligible citizens and permanent residents of Australia can apply up to 2019, 2021. Temporary residents can, but there's a whole lot of rules and regulations around that, which I'm not going to bore you. In fact, it's about 10 times the size of what the normal ones are. So again, applications can be submitted through MyGov, and you will not need to pay tax on amounts released and will not need to include these amounts in your tax return. Because the way it works under the laws, it's neither assessable nor is it exempt income. It's virtually a free gift. So that's important. Again, be aware of scams and schemes. So let's go through what we've talked around about all of this, your application, temporary residences, assessing your eligibility. We looked at the legislation, so there's no need to look at it, but let's have a look at the tax office. You do not need to attach evidence to support your application. However, you should keep records of documents to confirm your eligibility. It is important you assess your eligibility accurately. We're administering this measure on behalf of Australians who will manage the eligible criteria with strict guidelines to ensure we can support those by COVID-19. So there are penalties for making false and misleading, but essentially the tax office is going to run it through pretty quickly. So implications of accessing your super early. So these are the downsides. So it may affect your insurances and your life and total permanent disability insurance. So again, have a chat with your advisor about that. Now, insurance may not be available on accounts that are fully withdrawn or have a balance below 6,000. So you've just got to be very careful on that one around insurances. So get ready to apply. Well, you don't need to. If you've got a MyGov account, then make sure it's linked to the ATO. Have your bank account information available because they need to know where to pay that amount. You'll need this to complete your application. So again, the taxation office is doing a whole lot of heavy lifting for you. You see, your fund, whether it's an industry or retail fund or even SMSF, the money doesn't go from them to you. It goes to the tax office, and then the tax office will pay you. So it's a good way. It's actually the whole system is extremely streamlined. Again, check your super balance. Your actual account balance may be higher or lower than on the ATO. So have a look at the ATO site, but you can go onto your website if you have access to your super funds online member portal, you can log on and check your current account balance. Actually, it'd be quite interesting to go and see anyway. I'm sure many of you have a look at your last statements you should have received, and also what your balance was on the currently, to see whether it's gone down or quite significantly. So again, submit an application. We went through that before. Now, after you apply, this is the important stuff. So we're going to do that. Hopefully, most of you will do that today. It will take us up to 4 business days to process your application and send you a letter of approval or rejection. Now, I'm not sure that the only way you're going to get a rejection, I would assume, is because it's a self-assessment, is if you don't have that money in your superannuation fund, because they are linked through the MyGov website. Now here's important. Once your application is approved, you do not need to contact us or your fund. And that's crucial. This is streamlined stuff. So you're going to get a notice from the tax office. Your fund will make the payment to you without needing to apply to them directly. The APRA have issued guidelines to super funds and expect payment to be made to members within 5 business days. Well, it seems there it actually doesn't need, like normal compassionate grounds, to go to the ATO. It looks as though the ATO is allowing them to pay directly. So that's a huge benefit, because again, it's streamlining, making sure it's fast. However, this time may increase where funds need to clarify further information, which we'll have a look at. Okay, so if you're in your parents' fund or you've got your SMSF, you'll need to let them know that there's a determination. So that's not a big one. So watch out for scams. There's already, as I said, people on doing cold calls and off and running about that one. Now let's go and have a look. As I said, you've got the issue there from the Money Smart site. This is from APRA. So this goes to superannuation trustees. So wherever you are, this superannuation trustee has to abide by this. Actually, I've just got a couple of questions that will go in. One from Susan. If you're employed but your hours have been decreased by 20% or more, can you access the 10K tax-free? Hence 5 day, absolutely. So hopefully you saw that, Susan, we actually covered that twice. So again, if you can show that you're working 5 days and you've gone to 4, then absolutely. And remember, this is a self-assessment. If a person is paid monthly, the reduction in hours will not show until next month. It's got nothing to do with payment. Again, Susan, essentially it is just you saying that you know that you're effectively being reduced. So what you've got to do is have an information, or if you've got an email there from your employer that you effectively have gone down to 2 days a week. If that's the case, then you're okay. But again, just go and check a tax advisor or a tax agent or licensed advisor. Dennis Lim, applying withdrawal of 10,000 preserved or restricted or unrestricted. Dennis, that's a really good one. If you have a look at the laws, you can actually apply. So this is a very sophisticated question, Derek. Inside our account balances, we have preserved, restricted and unrestricted. So this enables us to take money out of our preserved benefits. So if you are, this is again another reason why we want to make sure we're dealing with a licensed planner or a tax agent, so that they know there's these little strategies around that really make a big difference. Obviously, Dennis is well and truly on top of it. So you want to take the $10,000 out of your preserved benefits. So that's a really good question there, Dennis, on that one. Ian Craig, if one owes money to a federal government agency, tax debt, child, what happens to the gross payment? This comes straight out of my understanding, Ian, if we had a look at the tax office, this comes from the superannuation fund directly down to the member and doesn't go into the tax office's coffers, which is quite interesting because then obviously there's got to be an offset. So again, Chris, if I'll just go back to payment, because this is pretty important. Let's just go back and have a look. I'll send the link, but you can, if you go and have a look at the, if you just did a Google ATO COVID-19 early release of super, and we want to go down because this is a really important. This is the top result. There goes my stupid Google thing there anyway. So get ready to apply, submit an application. Now, after you apply, it will take us up to 4 business days to process your application, send a letter. Now, once your application is approved, you do not need to contact us or your fund. Now, this is a big one. Your fund will make the payment to you without you needing to apply to them directly. So that's fairly important, is that under most compassionate grounds, it goes to the tax office. But in this instance, we don't need to. It's actually going to be paid to you directly. So therefore, if you've got any offsets or amounts or tax debts, it's not to go through there. Can amounts, from Joanne, can amounts be released from TRIS under compassionate grounds? Absolutely. So it can come out of anywhere. You could have an existing pension and an accumulation account balance. Look, I'm not sure, but if a TRIS, you can absolutely. Does a payment have to be allowed by the trustee to the super fund? That's a really good issue, but as you can see before, there's now a requirement, an operating standard, and effectively they've thought about this one. It's now an operating standard that this payment must be required. So if a fund's trustee doesn't allow the payment there, and for example, with a self-managed super fund, all the deeds that I've written, certainly the light year docs, SMSF, that enables a payment from a compassionate ground. So if you've got an SMSF, you might need to upgrade it, but a good SMSF will cover it. But if you're an industry or retail fund, they can't use that as an excuse because it's an operating standard and they will have needed to have amended their deed. I assume it will be split in proportion of the taxable and tax-free components. That's a really good question, David. Leave that with me. I'm assuming, no, in fact, if we have a look at it, yeah, leave that with me. That's a really good question, David. In fact, I hadn't even thought about that and doesn't look as though it's covered in the regulations. So if I can come back to you on that, David, before I send out this video, I'll do some research on that one. But excellent question there. I've contributed 25K. If I now withdraw 10K, how does this affect my tax deduction? Charles, if you've already contributed 25K, that will be tax deductible if you already claimed that. Now, if you withdraw the 10K, it's actually coming out of the fund. You're looking at two different things. One is a contribution going in, and when money goes in, is it tax deductible or not? So if you've claimed a deduction or expect to claim a deduction, that's okay. Now, withdrawal comes out as a lump sum. So they're two quite different systems, so it's not going to impact there. Just be careful. Some people have said, well, what I'll do is I'll get the 10,000 out and I'll put it back in as getting a tax deductible contribution. Now, I'm not in great favour of that one, but again, just make sure you have a chat with your tax agent about that. Is there any provision to make repayment of the monies taken out? So what you can do is, I'll look at this as one of my strategies. There's no forced repayment, but you can contribute the money back in at any point in time, which is important. What are your views on recontribution? As I said there, Magda, look, I know it's going around. My feeling is, the best thing to do is take the money out, and if you don't need it, then effectively maybe recontribute it in at a later stage. Whether you take a tax deduction or not, I'd have a chat with my tax advisor. But effectively, there's nothing preventing you there. It would only be potentially a Part 4A issue. However, we're looking at two different acts. We're looking at the SIS Act taking the money out, and then the Tax Act putting the money back in. So the Commissioner hasn't really addressed that. For super fund, you cannot choose between preserved. Are they taken out proportionally? No, you can. You can, John. You can, when you go and withdraw your monies, you can decide whether to take it out preserved or unpreserved. So I would be taking it out of preserved benefits there. So what is the process for SMSF and receipt of payments? For that one, Troy, essentially what will happen there is it's exactly the same thing, is that the individual or the member, and Troy, you're going to have to monitor this for your clients, is that the member will go on the MyGov website. They're going to need the details of the trustee of the SMSF. They can get obviously the stuff off the super fund lookup, get the TFN, etc. And then what will happen from there is that will go into the application, and then the tax office will then write to the trustee. And I'm presuming there most of the stuff will then be go straight to your tax agent. So if you are making that application, make sure you're you're telling your tax agent that you're making this application, because they'll be receiving the correspondence on your behalf. Lots of questions, which is great. Are amounts released from TRIS subject to the 10% maximum limit? No, because it's not subject to the TRIS. So what we're doing is we're actually withdrawing an amount as a lump sum. Under a TRIS, you can't commute anyway. So this is a lump sum. It's not a commutation payment. So effectively, you can still get your 10% maximum limit from your TRIS as well. Great, Wilkinson. Can the $10,000 be spent on a new TV? Well, look, again, I think you've got to be sensible about it, but it doesn't make sense, does it? What happens if you're a casual employee, but due to the JobKeeper payment, your take-home pay is actually more? This is interesting if we have a look again through it, Jackie, and I'd point you back to the tax office there. Essentially, if I go back to the ATO and have a look at it, so your working hours were reduced by 20% or more, including to zero. So if we have a look at that, it's got nothing to do with the wages. Remember, I said that up front. So it's completely independent of what you're receiving. You may be getting more, but if your working hours reduced, then you are able to access that. So I think that's quite an interesting thing there. So do you have to have lodged a notice of deductibility before you withdraw? Probably, Chris, it's not a bad idea to do so. Do it up front so that at least the trustee of the fund is aware of it. So, Peter, do you tell the ATO, the super fund, you want it deducted from your preserved amount? I would assume there it's the superannuation fund that you would let know. I haven't checked the MyGov website whether that comes in, but definitely tell when the money comes from the superannuation fund. Let's say they pay the $10,000, then Peter, what I would be doing is going back and saying to them that you want that out of their preserved benefits. Sal, what I'll do is I will send a link to all the new regs, the EM and everything when I send out this recording, but I'll send it to you anyway because I know you're a bit of a Spock like that. Can you access super if you're on a JobKeeper? Absolutely. Tanya, again, remember, all you have to do is show that your working hours reduced by 20% or more. And generally that's going to be the case if you're on JobKeeper anyway. So this sits quite separately from JobKeeper. You can get, like for example, my daughter will be getting JobKeeper, plus she'll also be able to access her super. Now let's go back and have a look at the APRA guidelines about the trustees. So this is the Covid-19. This is for industry super fund trustees and also for retirement like CBA or the banks, etc. So we've got to make sure they don't weasel out. So remember, if they try and put a hurdle in, direct them back to this website. And again, go what Peter said is make sure it comes out of your preserved benefits. So the question here, in dealing with payments to members under the release of benefits on commercial grounds, what are APRA's expectations of licensees in terms of processing? So section 617D3 requires an RSE license to pay the benefit of the member as soon as practical after having received a determination from the ATO. So that's the new regulations and laws that even if they're trustee, they effectively are forced to do it unless it is a defined benefit fund, unless it's a defined benefit fund. In complying with this requirement, APRA expects that where the RSE licensee's automatic checking has not identified a red flag, and red flags, because it's coming from the tax office, they're minimising notability, as I'll show you. Payments will generally be made within 5 business days of receiving the determination from the ATO. So best case scenario, remember we had the ATO at 4 days and then now 5 days from APRA. And remember, these are business days, they don't work on weekends. In exceptional circumstances, such as where the RSC's automated checking has identified a red flag and additional fraud or other verification steps are required, or the payment is being made from interest held in defined benefit funds, APRA acknowledges the process for making payment may take longer. Nonetheless, APRA expects the licensee to make payments as expeditiously as possible. Now, APRA acknowledges that these timeframes may extend slightly where an RSC licensee experiences a high volume. So important, get in as soon as possible. Now, here, I think this is crucial. APRA notes that such a process differs from the usual process of making payments under early release grounds, as the application process has additional security controls, and RSC licensees exempt from undertaking upfront customer verification in accordance with anti-money laundering. So here, AUSTRAC introduced a rule under the Anti-Money Laundering Counter-Terrorism Financing Act, which makes clear that an RSC licensee is not required to carry out customer verification under the money laundering in releasing COVID-19 on compassionate grounds under an ATO determination. So again, what they've done is they've virtually taken off all the hurdles to ensure that effectively you can access those monies directly from the trustee, and more importantly, the trustee of the super fund can't say, oh, look, this is against anti-money laundering. You need to verify, because essentially it's come from the tax office. The tax office is on your MyGov website. They know your tax file number. They know your address. They know you've got super. Again, it's a self-assessment system, so there's no verification. They can't say, well, it's not on the trustee, because obviously it's a regulated rule. And if they put in any pressure, then you can take them straight away to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, and that will get them spruced up pretty quickly. So David, work hours reduced by over 20% for 1 week only, then back to full hours. Is this okay to apply? Look, I'm not sure on that one. What I would suggest is there's a really good site that I go onto. So I would go to ATO COVID questions. Oh, sorry. COVID support. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll find, here we go. So this is the community .ato.gov.au, and you've got the job seeker payment, but you can go in and have a look at the ones for accessing super. So what you do is register there. It's a really good one. So community, I'll send this out, ato.gov.au. And I've in fact asked a whole lot of questions around JobKeeper and stuff like that. So look, it's not a bad one to go on and ask that question. In fact, I'll probably do it as an aside as well. So let's have a look at that one. The other one, please fix the position of your mic. Sorry, it's Snello sound. Hopefully that's a bit better, John. Sorry about that. I'm looking at a whole lot of things. Let's have a look at the last question, then we'll go through the 5 reasons why we might want to take it. Do you have a notice? So microphone is crazy. Okay, so sorry about that, Grant. I'll just make sure that I speak into the microphone a little bit later on. So let's go back to and finish off the 5 reasons. So I've had a look at the laws. Again, have a look at that community support. I find that's a really good site, and they get back within a day or two, particularly around that issue we looked at, that 20% down this week and later on. I'd say you probably need a little bit later on. Now, 3 reasons for withdrawal. Sounds obvious, but we're in pretty tough times at the moment. So you basically need the money to live on, pay rent, school fees and mortgages. So I think that's just a given. And again, you might be reducing your retirement, but the main thing is, if you're so stressed at the moment, and more than 77% of Australians are so stressed and anxious about the next week, it's better, and that's the whole reason for this amount of money, is to take it out and at least take some pressure off yourself in the future. Again, it's not made for TVs or going and buying beers. It's there to give yourself a bit of a cushion. And remember, you also get it after the 1st of July. Now, as I said before, it's not a bad thing. I mean, if you have a look at it, you can pull it out now. You can always contribute it back, as a couple of people have suggested. And we can contribute it back in 6 months or in 12 months' time. If we don't use it, put it in your bank account. And let's face it, the returns that your super fund's going to get over the next 6 months to 12 months probably aren't going to be significant, particularly if a lot of money is being drawn out of these funds. So pull it out, because if you don't pull it out now, you're never going to be able to pull it out after September applies anyway. So remember, you can always put it back in. You're not going to miss that much if it's 6 to 12 months. Now, the money is coming out of, look, they say 1 million Australian super fund members have already registered interest. My feeling is by the time we get around to 30 June, we'll probably be up around about 2 to 3 million people will actually be taking their money, because it's going to be 2 months on from this. People are going to be even more short of money. The JobKeeper will obviously help, but again, we want to be in that position of having a bit of a fail safe. Now, if that's the case, then retail industry superannuation funds are going to have to find the cash somewhere. A lot of them are running very small cash balances, so they're going to have to start to sell equities. It's hard for them to sell properties and other private equity assets or things that are illiquid. So that they'll be looking for shares and also bonds, which will further depress the prices on both shares and bonds up until September. And that means at that point in time, that investments will generally go down. So it's not a bad idea to pull the money out now, knowing that the value per member is actually going to go down potentially over the next 6 to 12 months. Then when you put your money back in, you're going to get more bang for your buck. But again, that's just logic from my perspective. But what I would suggest is you want to have a chat with your advisor on that one. Now, if you're a young couple who hasn't been able to get a home, then as I said before, property prices are depressed at the moment, certainly in South Australia. I don't know around your area. If you are both able to withdraw that money then effectively you can be in a position that by early July, that both of you will have $40,000, which will be a good deposit for buying a property. Look, they tried the First Homes Super Saver scheme years ago, or still years ago, but there was a lot of regulations. This is a lot easier way of doing that, and the banks are going to be pretty willing to lend if you've got a good, stable job. And look, by the time you get around to July, August, we should know a bit further about it. So it's a great opportunity to get into the market if you're a first home buyer. The other one is, of course, just makes sense, as any financial planner will tell you. And normally when people retire, the first thing they do with their super is pay off their mortgages and also all their debt. Now, if credit card debt is running at 20%, and you've got personal loans at 7 or 8 or 9%, plus mortgages, which you can always use as an offset account withdraw later on, it makes sense to obviously pay those up, because the last thing you need at the moment is to create stress. So there are 5 reasons. I'm sure you guys have had a lot. I talked about the tax issue. But again, watch out. Make sure you get advice from your agent and your licensed financial planner. Now, if you withdraw your money, just be careful about insurance. If you lose insurance, given the fact that there's a lot of anxiety going around, etc., if that manifests in something worse, you may want that sickness and accident insurance, which I'm not sure how it applies if you've effectively been laid off work anyway. Now, if you're in an SMSF with your parents, make sure you tell them before you lodge that you're actually wanting this money out, so they've got enough cash to pay out, because that guideline, that 5-day guideline, applies to APRA funds, which are retail industry funds, but make sure you have a chat with your parents or wherever you're in your SMSF to make sure there's enough cash. Be careful of cold callers, people impersonating themselves from the tax office, and also super fund trustees. Just be careful about someone impersonating that, and just be mindful of your retirement. Now, in terms of tax agents and also financial planners, I'll just spend a minute on this before we'll close up. ASIC has come out and given relief. I'll send this out as well for you. There's it's quite an extensive explanatory memorandum and also ASIC relief. But in short, for registered tax agents who generally are exempt for licensing when dealing with self-managed super funds such as investment strategies, so on and so forth, but setting up a fund or contributions or taking out amounts of lump sum, you need to be licensed for that. But ASIC's given an exemption for that. Now, what has to happen is you need to have a record of advice, being a much shorter, simpler document than a statement of advice. Now, I know, Sally, you're doing one for me, so I can put actually up on the Lightyear Docs website. Now, the advice fee, if any, is capped at $300, so you can't charge any more than $300. It doesn't say whether that is for both this income year and next income year. I'm assuming it's for one set of advice for both. Now, the advice provider must establish a client's entitled to the early release. So I'll just go through, and whether you're on job seeker, unemployed, redundant, or more importantly, the fact that you've got 20 hours, if you can show that, then you're A-OK. And you can't cold call, etc., as I said. So you must have been approached for the advice provider for the advice. Now, of course, you can send out an email to parents and everyone talking about this early release scheme. And if anyone comes and asks you about that advice, then you're A-OK there. But remember, you're going to have to do a record of advice on that one. Okay, from Kim, if my super's invested BT Wrap, can I withdraw 10K? Absolutely. So again, have a look, Kim, around the particular issues there as well. Have a look at the tax office site. But if the key thing is all APRA funds, so that's all industry funds, BT Wrap, everything is caught as an APRA fund. And so therefore these rules apply, and you've just got to show you've got that 20% less work test. So jump on to MyGov and go ahead. And then let's go on from there. So in short, I mean, that's where we are at the moment. Look, it's a pretty good position where we are. As I take you right back to here, from my perspective, the chances of getting money out of super are very minimal. But, when the family is hurting, when individuals are hurting, it's been a great gift from the government and a great idea from the government to access our super. Now, I know a lot of people in the superannuation industry are upset, but at the end of the day, this is a life and death situation for many people. So it's been good, and also the tax office have done a wondrous job, as has ASIC and has APRA. So all the regulators have moved heaven and earth to make sure this is as easy as pie. So again, this is a great opportunity. Let's hopefully, we'll wait and see, and let's see what happens between now and 30 June and post 30 June. Unfortunately, can you imagine some people who aren't aware of this? And that's why it's incumbent upon everyone to let everyone know that they end up going bankrupt through credit card and other debt, or their house repossessed in October or November, and they weren't aware of this measure. And that'd be a sad thing for anyone. I certainly don't want to see one person who's missed out. Okay, so I've had some SMSF clients state they cannot see the SMSF in MyGov. Generally that is going to be the case. If you have a look at the tax office, I'll send that information out. There are some specific things you can do around self-managed superannuation funds. I think you need to apply to the tax office directly on that one, because MyGov basically does all the retail and industry superannuation funds. So I'll send you through some of that information, and also the bit on untaxed, taxable and tax-free components from David Pereira. So expect this information to get to you in the early this afternoon. Anyway, it's Grant Abbott signing off. Thank you all for attending this session.